202-585-3881, Democrats 202-585-3880, Independents 202-585-3882, and if you're outside the U.S., it's 202-585.
We take you now live to the floor of the U.S. House.
As folks are dialing
1901, an act to authorize the President to extend the term of the nuclear energy agreement with the Republic of Korea until March 19, 2016.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motion to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Record votes on postponed questions will be taken later. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1791 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 194, H.R. 1791, a bill to amend the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to codify authority under existing grant guidance authorizing use of Urban Area Security Initiative and State Homeland Security Grant Program funding for enhancing medical preparedness, medical surge capacity, and mass prophylaxis capabilities.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Indiana, Mrs. Brooks, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Payne, will each control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Indiana.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend the remarks and include any extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 1791, the Medical Preparedness Allowable Use Act, introduced by my colleague and the former chairman of the Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response and Communications, the Honorable Congressman Bilirakis from Florida. This bill amends the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to make it clear that grant funds under the State Homeland Security Grant Program and Urban Area Security Initiative may be used to enhance medical preparedness and purchase medical countermeasures. The Emergency Preparedness, Response and Communications Subcommittee held a series of hearings in the 112th Congress on medical preparedness. The subcommittee heard about the importance of medical countermeasures from representatives of the emergency response community, and this bill is in response to those concerns. In August, I held a field hearing in my district looking at Central Indiana's ability to handle a mass casualty event. Like the witnesses who testified at the hearings held in the 112th Congress, these witnesses at the field hearing stressed the importance of building medical preparedness. As a result of this bill, grant funds could be used for items such as pre-deployed medical kits for first responders and their families, caches of equipment, training and exercises, and planning activities. The grant guidance for these programs currently allows funds to be used for medical preparedness equipment and activities. This bill codifies those activities to ensure that they will continue to be allowable and it will not cost any additional money to do so. We've seen the benefits that grant funds, including those used for medical preparedness activities, have provided when it comes to response capabilities. This was clearly demonstrated in response to the Boston Marathon bombings. And we know that the threat of chemical or biological attack is real. In fact, my subcommittee will be holding a hearing next week to get an update on the bioterrorism threat and preparedness here in this country. We must ensure that our first responders have the tools and capabilities they need if such an event should occur. This bill has the support of several first responder groups, including the International Association of Emergency Managers, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and the Emergency Services Coalition for Medical Preparedness. I ask unanimous consent to insert their letters of support into the record.
Action.
H.R. 1791 was approved by the Committee on Homeland Security last year by a bipartisan voice vote. I am pleased that during the markup, the committee approved an amendment offered by the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Payne, to ensure that in addition to protecting first responders, funds can also be used to protect vulnerable populations such as children. I urge fellow members to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1791, the Medical Preparedness Allowable Use Act. and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 1791 would formally authorize grant recipients under the State Homeland Security Grant or Urban Area Security Initiative program to use the funding to enhance medical preparedness and medical surge capacity. Although the Federal Emergency Management Agency also permits grantees to use these funds to enhance medical preparedness, this measure will give some predictability to grant recipients as they struggle to rebuild and maintain a robust medical response capability at the state and local level. Additionally, I am proud to support this effort to provide resources that will equip our first responders with home medical kits. When disasters strike, we have an obligation to protect our protectors. We also have an obligation to protect the most vulnerable in our communities. During the full committee markup of H.R. 1791, the committee unanimously approved an amendment I offered. This amendment would ensure that resources are available to develop plans to distribute countermeasures to schools and child care facilities, the elderly, and individuals with special needs in low-income communities in the event of a biological incident. I would like to thank the full committee chair, Mr. McCall, and the subcommittee chairwoman, Ms. Brooks, for supporting my amendment. I also look forward to continue work with both of you in the future and on other initiatives such as H.R. 3158, the Safe in Our Schools Act, to ensure that the needs of our school children and other vulnerable populations are adequately addressed in emergency preparedness and response plans. On behalf of the ranking member, Mr. Thompson, I would also like to thank Chairman McCall for working with us to reauthorize the Metropolitan Medical Response System, the MMRS. This program provided targeted grants to 124 highly populated jurisdictions to support the integration of emergency management, health, and medical systems into an organized response to mass casualty events. The program has not been funded since year 2011, and it is authorized, and its authorization has lapsed. I sincerely hope that the next time we meet here on the House floor to address medical preparedness, it will be to consider bipartisan reauthorization legislation for the MMRS. As state and local governments continue to stretch their budgets to make up for the reduced federal support across many programs, we must make sure that the public health community is prepared and equipped to keep our constituents safe. I look forward to working with my ranking member and the majority to ensure the MMRS remains a priority for this committee. In the meantime, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1791. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as he may consume to the distinguished gentleman from Florida, the sponsor of this legislation, Mr. Bilirakis.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I must say, Madam Chair, you're doing an outstanding job chairing this committee. And thank you for your help on this bill. And I also want to thank Mr. Payne. Your father would be very proud of you today. He was a good friend of mine. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1791, the Medical Preparedness Allowable Use Act, which amends the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to make it clear that grant funds under the State Homeland Security Grant Program and the Urban Area Security Initiative may be used to enhance the medical preparedness and purchase medical countermeasures. I originally introduced the Medical Preparedness Allowable Use Act in 2012 after a series of hearings on medical countermeasures in the Committee on Homeland Security Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Communications. At these hearings, we received testimony from representatives of the emergency response community on that importance of stockpiling medical countermeasures in the event of a WMD attack. This includes pre-deployed medical kits for first responders and their families, similar to those provided to postal workers participating in the National U.S. Postal Medical Countermeasures Dispensing Pilot Program. The grant guidance for the State Homeland Security Grant Program and the Urban Area Security Initiative currently permits this funding to be used to procure medical countermeasures and for other medical preparedness and medical surge capacity equipment and activities. However, this guidance is developed on an annual basis, as our chair said, and there is no guarantee that these uses will be authorized in the future. That's why this bill is so very important. To be clear, no new funding is authorized in this bill. However, these expenditures authorized and codified by the bill we are considering today can make a big difference in the protection of the public, including emergency responders in the event of attack, and there should be no doubt that grant funding may be used to support them now and in the future. As the former chairman of the Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Communications, I consistently find myself in awe of the first responders and the sacrifices they have made for the public. In the wake of events such as Hurricane Sandy, I am committed to ensuring Congress does all that it can to support those brave men and women. I am pleased that this legislation is supported by the Emergency Services Coalition on Medical Preparedness and other organizations as well, but the Emergency Service Coalition on Medical Preparedness works to ensure that we protect the protectors. And I also thank the ranking member for adding that great amendment, because we must protect our children as well. I thank and commend, of course, Representative Susan Brooks, our chair, for her assistance with this bill and for her willingness to join me as an original co-sponsor. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and yield back the balance of my time, and I urge that all members support this great, very important bill. Thank you.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. If the gentleman from New Jersey has no further speakers, I'm prepared to close once the gentleman does.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you. I have no more speakers. Okay. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, excuse me, sir. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of this measure as a small step to address gapping needs at the state and local level when it comes to medical preparedness. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1791, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as the gentleman from Florida noted in his statement, this bill has passed the House, the last Congress, by a bipartisan vote of 397 to 1. I hope members will once again express their support for the men and women who protect us every day by voting for this bill. I want to thank my ranking member for his dedication and his commitment to protecting the protectors, as he's so eloquently stated, and we certainly request that our fellow members support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 1791 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion—
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Ask for the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise or remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 357 as amended, the GI Bill Tuition Fairness Act of 2013.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 357, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to require courses of education provided by public institutions of higher education that are approved for purposes of the educational assistance programs administered by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to charge veterans tuition and fees at the in-state tuition rate.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I might consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
H.R. 357 as amended is a bipartisan package of legislation that relates to improving employment and training opportunities for America's veterans. While there are many worthwhile provisions in this bill, I want to focus on Section 4 primarily, which deals with in-state tuition for veterans, and Section 14, which ensures privacy of veterans who are being treated at a VA medical facility. Mr. Speaker, our nation's veterans have always been a source of strength for America's economy. The post-9/11 GI Bill has given thousands of our veterans the opportunity to attend college or receive other types of vocational training at little to no cost to the veteran themselves. Every dollar that we provide in education and training benefits to veterans under the GI Bill goes right back into our economy when these veterans graduate and enter the workforce. I think we can all call that a great investment. However, there are many veterans, through no fault of their own, who are forced to pay exorbitant tuition rates to schools simply because of the transit nature of their military service, and that precludes them from meeting some of the burdensome state residency requirements. Mr. Speaker, as most American families know, the difference between in-state versus out-of-state tuition at most public schools is immense. According to the College Board, the average in-state tuition and fees at public institutions is now $8,655 a year. Out-of-state students pay an average of $21,706 per year. Since the post-9/11 GI Bill will only pay for tuition and fees at the in-state rates at public schools, out-of-state student veterans could incur significant debt to make up that difference. I believe that this practice has got to end. The men and women who served this nation did not just defend as citizens of their own home states, but the citizens of all 50 states. The educational benefits they receive from the taxpayers should reflect the same reality. Mr. Speaker, many states are out in front on this issue, including my home state of Florida. And I applaud the 22 states that currently offer some form of in-state tuition to veterans regardless of their residency. Other state legislatures, again, as I said, including my home state of Florida, are currently reviewing legislation to provide this benefit. And it's my hope that the House passes this bill and it will encourage those states to move forward. To that end, Section 4 of the bill would require that in order for public colleges and universities to be eligible to receive payments from a veteran's GI Bill benefits, that they must enroll these veterans at in-state tuition and fee rates. They are important limitations to these requirements. First, states would be permitted to require that student veterans show intent to become full-time residents of the state in which they are attending school. Secondly, the in-state requirement would only apply to veterans who are attending college within 3 years of their discharge from active duty. Now, these limitations will ensure that this policy not only targets the population of veterans that are most adversely affected by residency requirements following their military separation, but also fairly recognizes states' legitimate interest in subsidizing public education for its taxpaying citizens. Mr. Speaker, I also want to highlight the Section 14 of the bill, which incorporates the text of a bill that I introduced called the Veterans Privacy Act. In June of 2012, a covert camera disguised as a smoke detector was installed in the room of a brain-damaged veteran who was being treated at the James A. Haley VA Medical Center in Tampa. Now, upon discovering the hidden camera, the veteran's family was understandably outraged. When the veteran's family asked about the camera, VA officials first stated that the camera did not exist. Then they changed their story and admitted that the smoke detector was actually a video camera. And when further asked if the camera was recording, VA told the family that the camera was only monitoring the patient, it was not recording. Only after inquiries by local media and the Veterans Committee did VA admit that the camera was in fact recording the patient. VA then removed the camera from the patient's room. Now, in the wake of this incident, I sent a letter to VA asking for its legal authority to place a camera in the patient's room without their consent. VA replied that the hidden camera did not violate the law. I'm deeply disturbed at VA's actions in response to the privacy interests of this veteran and can't help but wonder whether similar incidents are occurring across the country. That's why I authored this section, which should direct VA to prescribe regulations ensuring that when veterans receive care from VA, their privacy will not be violated by unauthorized video surveillance. Mr. Speaker, as I said, there are many other worthwhile provisions in this bill, and I defer to my colleagues on the floor this afternoon to highlight other remaining provisions. I thank my good friends and the ranking member of the committee and also Mr. Takano and everybody that's here today that are co-sponsors of this bill in helping us to move forward. I'm also grateful to Leader Cantor and Speaker Boehner for their help in bringing this legislation to the floor. With that, I urge all of my colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 357 as amended, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
As one of Riverside County's representatives, a county that has the 8th largest veterans population in the nation, I proudly rise today in support of H.R. 357 as amended. This bill is a far-ranging bill that seeks to improve the lives of our veterans. H.R. 357 includes a number of measures that were considered by the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity and was reported favorably out of the Veterans Affairs Committee last June. I want to thank Chairman Miller of the full committee and Chairman Flores of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity for their leadership. I especially enjoyed holding several field hearings last year with Chairman Flores in our respective districts. The Veterans Affairs Committee has traditionally been a bipartisan committee, and I'm pleased to see that cooperation continues as both leaders helped bring this bill to the floor today. In the area of education, H.R. 357 would require all public colleges and universities using the GI Bill to provide all veterans with in-state tuition rates. Currently, veterans who have not established residency at the school of their choice must pay out-of-state tuition rates. In order to fulfill their military obligations, service members must uproot their families and periodically move around the country. This makes it difficult to establish residency for purposes of in-state tuition rates when veterans seek to use their GI Bill benefits. By providing all veterans with in-state tuition rates, H.R. 357 will make it easier for veterans to choose the educational institution that best serves their needs. The new Transition Assistance Program includes a mandatory 5-day core program of instruction that all separating service members are required to take. The education portion is an optional track available to all members, but is not required. Some separating service members may not have additional time to take an optional course. H.R. 357 would move the education track to the mandatory portion for veterans seeking to use their GI benefits, which will ensure their GI Bill benefits, which will ensure that these veterans can make better choices regarding their education and assist them in making the most of their GI Bill benefits. In addition, H.R. 357 also extends the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program for 2 months to better align the program with the traditional academic semester. Now, in addition to these provisions, Mr. Speaker, I would like to highlight 2 sections which I have sponsored and which are included in H.R. 357. I believe these sections will also assist our veterans in terms of their education and in finding work after the separation from the military. Section 6 is from the first bill I introduced, H.R. 844, the Vet Success Enhancement Act. This provision would extend from 12 years to 17 years the eligibility period that veterans with service-connected disabilities have to enroll in VA vocational rehabilitation and employment programs. Veterans with traumatic brain injury or spinal cord injury often require years to complete rehabilitation and adjust to the new realities of day-to-day living. Only then can these veterans consider returning to work. This provision will provide these veterans with the additional time they need to seek vocational rehabilitative services. Section 7 is from another bill I introduced, H.R. 1453, the Work Study for Student Veterans Act. This section provides for a 5-year extension of the Veterans Work Study program at the VA. As an educator, I know how important these programs are to students to enable them to fit some part-time work into their academic term. The VA program pays veterans to perform a variety of tasks, including assisting other transitioning veterans by helping them with outreach. By providing support in the College Office of Veterans Affairs, these students help other veterans to help navigate the VA system. It is an important program to veteran students in my district and to thousands of others in schools across the country. The last provision that tackles transition issues would codify the major duties of the directors and assistant directors from the Department of Labor's Veterans Employment and Training Services. At present, there is no standardization of the requirements and duties of these positions. H.R. 357 will provide more consistency in the services provided veterans by standardizing the responsibilities of these officials. In addition, codifying their duties will enable us to better track their funding, review their performance, and hold everyone accountable to the same standard. These are important changes to the educational benefits and transition services for our veterans and will better assist veterans in serving our communities and our nation after they leave service. Finally, in terms of fighting veteran homelessness and improving VA medical care, H.R. 357 would clarify that veterans who are homeless and participating in the HUD-VASH voucher program and those who are transitioning from incarceration are eligible for services under the Homeless Veteran Reintegration Program, or the HVRP. I'm sure that all these veterans will find these services very beneficial as they look to begin the next chapter in their lives. H.R. 357 would require the VA to more consistently report infectious diseases diagnosed at VA medical facilities to state authorities to increase the likelihood that infectious disease outbreaks may occur are addressed sooner and more comprehensively. Although we have expressed concerns over the enforcement mechanism included in this provision, we all can support the importance of comprehensive notification. H.R. 357 also includes a provision that would protect a veteran's personal privacy by directing the VA to ensure that any visual recording made of a patient during treatment is carried out only with the full and informed consent of that patient. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am proud to recognize for 2 minutes the Vice Chairman of the full committee, a staunch supporter of veterans, not only in his community but around this country, Gus Bilirakis.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Thanks for all your good work on behalf of our true American heroes. And I also want to thank the ranking member for his good work on behalf of this particular bill and all its provisions. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 357, the GI Bill, Tuition Fairness Act of 2013. This is an important package of veterans legislation, and I'm a co-sponsor that works to increase access for our nation's heroes and the benefits they have earned through their service to our country. In particular, I want to highlight 3 sections of this legislation that I'm very proud to support. H.R. 357 will make important changes to the GI Bill program that will allow states to jumpstart the process to provide in-state tuition to veterans. The bill will require that in order for an educational institution to receive GI Bill funding, they must offer in-state tuition to veterans regardless of the veteran's residency. That's the least we can do, and I really appreciate the Chair sponsoring this provision. Mr. Speaker, our members of the armed services are not given options as to where they will reside. They move according to the needs of the military. It is only fitting that when these veterans use their earned benefits, they are not penalized because of residency requirements that they have no control over. H.R. 357 also provides an extension of the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program, also originally sponsored by our Chair. This important program offers 12 months of training assistance to unemployed veterans between the age of 35 and 60. Again, it's the least we can do. During these difficult economic times, it is important that we do everything we can to assist our veterans in their job searches and retraining efforts. I also want to commend the Chairman for another provision, and it's the VA's Patients Privacy Act, and of course we need to give our veterans the privacy that they so deserve as patients.
Gentleman's time has expired.
And of course I'd like to urge all our members to support this great bill, and I want to thank the Chairman and the Ranking Member. Thank you very much, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Nevada, Ms. Titus, who is also the ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on Disability and Memorial Affairs.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Chairman for bringing this bill to the floor, and my colleague and fellow educator, the Ranking Member, Mr. Takano, for yielding to me. I rise today in support of H.R. 357, the GI Bill Tuition Fairness Act of 2013. As Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, I know firsthand the importance of a college education. And I'm proud that my home state of Nevada already has laws in place that allow all veterans, regardless of residency status, to pay in-state tuition while attending our public colleges and universities. I was fortunate to teach a number of our nation's heroes during my time at UNLV. Having these veterans in class was truly a win-win situation. Our veterans are able to pursue a college degree to help them with their transition to civilian life, and their fellow students are able to benefit from hearing about the veterans' experiences in the military, on the battlefield, in foreign lands while they have served our country. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this important legislation that will improve our higher education system and help our nation's heroes. It will help them to acquire the skills and knowledge to complement their experience so they can succeed once they leave the military. I thank you again for bringing this bill, and I encourage all of my colleagues to support it. And I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to recognize the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation, the gentleman from Colorado, for 2 minutes, Mr. Kaufman.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 2 minutes.
Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 357, in particular Section 13, which encompasses my legislation, the Infectious Disease Reporting Act. Section 13 imposes necessary requirements on the Department of Veterans Affairs to report infectious disease outbreaks at their medical facilities. These requirements are a response to infectious disease problems at VA facilities that were uncovered by my subcommittee's investigations last year. The investigations highlighted a deadly outbreak of Legionnaire's disease at the Pittsburgh VA from February 2011 to November 2012 that tragically caused the death of at least 5 veterans and inflicted as many as 22 others. According to medical experts, timely disease surveillance is critical to infectious disease control, and delayed, incomplete, or inconsistent disease reporting can compromise an effective public health response and result in further infectious disease outbreaks. Although it has become clear these deaths could have been prevented with proper procedures, the VA failed to act appropriately within widely accepted medical practices. Surprisingly, the VA is not required by current law to report the incidence of infectious diseases at their facilities to state and local public health officials. As one of the nation's largest healthcare providers, VA should set the standard for infectious disease reporting. However, they do not even participate in infectious disease reporting like all other medical facilities within a particular state, creating a public health risk to those localities with VA facilities. In response, Section 13 requires the VA to report each case of an infectious disease in accordance with the laws of the state in which the facility is located.
The gentleman is recognized for additional 30 seconds.
And failure to report will subject the VA facility to state penalties. These penalties are vital to ensure the VA will comply with and improve their reporting requirements. Given the VA's recent inadequate responses to infectious disease outbreaks, it is imperative that Congress and our veterans demand improvements. Therefore, I urge full support of Section 13 of H.R. 357, as well as passage of the entire bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to a great champion of veterans, Mr. Doyle of Pennsylvania, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, a former member of this committee.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in support of H.R. 357, the GI Bill Tuition Fairness Act. This legislation contains a number of important changes in VA programs that provide our veterans with education, training, rehabilitation, disability benefits, and housing, and it deserves our support. I want to focus my remarks today on the disease reporting provisions in the bill, because I've been deeply involved with that issue over the last year or so. In November of 2012, the VA announced that there had been an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease at a VA hospital in Pittsburgh, which I represent. Shortly thereafter, I joined other members of the regional congressional delegation in requesting investigations into the outbreak. In response, the House Committee on Veterans Affairs and the VA Inspector General's Office examined the outbreak and the events leading up to it at length. The Centers for Disease Control also looked into the outbreak and determined that it had resulted in several deaths and more than 24 illnesses. I want to personally express my gratitude to my good friend, Veterans Affairs Committee Chairman Jeff Miller, Oversight Subcommittee Chairman Kaufman, Ranking Member Michoud, for being so responsive to our requests for investigations and investigating the outbreak and holding hearings on it last year. In the end, the hearings and investigations identified a number of shortcomings in the way the outbreak was handled and the need to be addressed. One of the concerns raised as we learned more about the outbreak was that for some time after the local VA facility knew it had Legionella bacteria in its water supply, that VA patients had been sickened by it, it had not notified state or local health agencies about the outbreak. Under current law, VA is not required to make such reports, which are required of all other hospitals. Chairman Miller, Subcommittee Chairman Kaufman, Senator Casey, Congressman Murphy, and Rothfuss and I all agree that in the future the VA should be required to report outbreaks of potentially deadly diseases to public health authorities, just like other hospitals already do. The language in this bill is the result of our discussions over a number of months. I believe that the need for this reporting requirement is obvious. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, which will make this important change. Mr. Chairman, I would like to add by unanimous consent an additional statement into the record. On January 29th, I was not present when H.R. 2642, the conference report for the Federal Agriculture Reform and Risk Management Act, better known as the Farm Bill, was voted on. Had I been present, I would have voted no.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Without objection. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank my good friend, Mr. Doyle, for being in the forefront on this particular issue. I would require an inquiry of the chair at the time remaining.
The gentleman from Florida has 9.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from the 12th District of Pennsylvania for 1.5 minutes, Mr. Rothfuss.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of our nation's veterans and the legislation currently under consideration. This legislation makes much-needed reforms that will bring accountability and transparency to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Over the past year, I've worked with Chairman Miller and Chairman Kaufman, my Western Pennsylvania colleagues, Congressman Doyle, Murphy, Kelly, and Schuster, and local veterans' families to investigate the outbreak of Legionnaire's disease at the Pittsburgh VA. The VA Office of the Inspector General determined that systemic failures surrounding the outbreak led to tragic and preventable deaths of local veterans. We must do all we can to ensure that this does not happen again. Chairman Kaufman's Infectious Disease Reporting Act, which I strongly support, has been included in today's legislation. This common-sense reform will increase transparency and save lives by improving infectious disease reporting requirements and requiring the VA to follow the same rules as the rest of our world-class health care institutions in Western Pennsylvania. Today's legislation also builds on an amendment I offered last year that prohibits bonuses for senior VA executives. This money would be better spent resolving the VA disability claims backlog and ensuring that our veterans are receiving the first-rate care they have earned. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to vote for this legislation, and I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues in Congress to serve our nation's veterans. I thank the Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from the 18th District of Pennsylvania, a Navy reservist himself, Dr. Murphy, for 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Speaker. Sonny Calgano, age 85, John Ciarola, age 83, Clark Compson, age 74, John McChesney, age 63, William Nicholas, 87, and Mitch Wansford, age 65, are the victims of a Legionnaire's disease outbreak at the VA Pittsburgh healthcare system in 2011 and 2012. Now, we can never really heal the emotional scars that these families have suffered, and the 21 additional families who had a member with a case of Legionnaire's. But we can work to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Today's legislation fixes one of the flaws uncovered during this investigation, and under this bill, VA hospitals will soon follow the same reporting requirements for infectious diseases as other medical facilities. This way, public health authorities will know when a disease outbreak occurs and can take immediate action. Thanks to the dogged determination and diligence of Chairman Miller, Congressman Kaufman, the House Veterans Affairs Committee, the ranking member, and my colleagues, Mr. Doyle, Rothfuss, and Kelly, we now know the Legionnaire's outbreak was entirely preventable, except for the gross mismanagement and negligence of a few key officials at the Pittsburgh VA. The Inspector General's report revealed some troubling findings. The VA lacked proper documentation and maintenance of the water systems and lacked proper informing of patients and testing the patients. Further, the VA did not communicate properly with the hospital system in the detection of Legionella. This is why this bill is necessary, because timely reporting and transparency requires adherence to the strongest standards, followed by quick action. But with this, our work is not yet done. It's been more than 2 months since I last asked VA Secretary General Shinseki to tell Congress what has been done to hold accountable those who are responsible for this outbreak. And his agency has promised to do so, but Congress is still waiting for an answer. Transparency and accountability are essential for the Secretary to rebuild the trust in the VA. We are grateful to our veterans for their service and grateful to the hard workers of the VA hospital system. The Pittsburgh VA has been a leader in the infection control work and should be commended for that. But in this case, the failures of some are simply unacceptable. My hope is that through this bill, requiring reporting of infection cases, we'll be able to restore the trust that the VA has with its veterans and their families. It is so critically needed in order to make these essential changes. I ask for my colleagues to vote in support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Does the gentleman from Florida have any additional speakers?
Mr. Speaker, I have one more speaker at this time.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I recognize the gentleman who is a stalwart supporter of the veterans in the state of Pennsylvania and also the United States. For 1 minute from the 3rd District of Pennsylvania, Mike Kelly.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 357, the GI Bill Tuition Fairness Act of 2013, a bill introduced by my friend, Representative Jeff Miller, Chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee. And I wish to highlight Section 13, which includes H.R. 1792, the Infectious Disease Reporting Act, a bill introduced by my friend, Representative Mike Kaufman, Chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Subcommittee on Oversight and Infections and Investigations. The Infectious Disease Reporting Act is a bill that I am proud to co-sponsor. This common-sense provision is necessary to respond to infectious disease issues at VA facilities nationwide, including the deadly outbreak of Legionnaire's disease at the Pittsburgh VA in 2011 and 2012 that killed at least 5 of our veterans and sickened as many as 22. This facility became ground zero for the Veterans Affairs Committee investigation, which found gross mismanagement at the Pittsburgh VA in response to the 2011 outbreak. This is particularly troubling to me, as there's many veterans in my district who rely on the Pittsburgh VA for their health care. Currently, the VA facilities are not required by law to report infectious disease at VA facilities to state and local health officials, even though the VA is one of the nation's largest health providers. Yet the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, it's only a few hundred feet away, is required to do this.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for additional 30 seconds.
Now, this inconsistent makes absolutely no sense and leaves the VA off the hook. In other words, the bill holds VA facilities accountable to the same standards as other medical facilities located in the same state. This just makes sense. Now, our veterans who sacrifice so much and deserve far better. This bill is a step in the right direction to ensure that veterans receive safe, high-quality health care at VA. I urge strong support of H.R. 357. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, H.R. 357 makes important changes to the benefits and services we provide veterans and to the manner in which we provide them. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 357 as amended. I have no further speakers, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members would have 5 legislative days with which to revise and extend their remarks, add any extraneous material that they may have on this legislation.
Without objection.
And thank you for all the members who have come to the floor today to support this bill. I encourage all members to support this legislation and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 357 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Speaker.
Gentleman from Florida.
On that, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12, Section A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
And the House gaveling back out. They'll